Alrighty, well, welcome to today's webinar, Get the Picture with SOLIDWORKS Drawings. Your presenters today are Cailin Helmick, Jared Trotter,
hey,
Tony Riggs, and I'm David Cersley. And we thank you for jumping in and attending here. When we were thinking about a name for our webinar, Tony said something funny. He said drawings. It's the thing none of us want to do, but we have to do. And I think we all agree with that. And it was well said and funny, but today we're going to share some of our favorite tips and tricks, some things that hopefully will make life a little easier for you the next time you have to do a drawing, make you a little more efficient. So for those of you that are logging in, if you have any questions, there's a Q&A button or a chat button. Please submit your questions there. We will try and answer questions as we go through this. We're going to leave hopefully some time at the end to answer questions. And then be sure to email us, and we will answer all your questions. We may have to email you back, but we will get back in touch with you because your questions are important, and we want to make sure we answer it best we can. With that said, we're going to jump over into our presentation. For those of you that are working into these crazy times with COVID and things like that, we'll let you know we're here for you. This is our some of the services we offer for you, but whether it's virtual mentoring sessions, whether you're looking to get certifications, if you have a seat of SOLIDWORKS, you do get a free voucher to take one of the exams and certifications. If you have any questions, contact one of us or your local account manager. And then tech support. This time, I know it's easy when we're working in offices to just lean back in our chair and say, hey, Tony, how's this working? Or, hey, I'm stuck on this. But when we're doing it virtually, it makes it a little more difficult. We're here through Zoom meetings, obviously things like this webinar, but you can also contact our tech support group. They are fantastic. There's an 800 number at our website. And also check out our YouTube channel. There's tons of videos up there, and it's pretty awesome. So if you need help, we're here for you. BC, before CAD. So I came across this image while we were putting this together, and we thought this was a cool image. And you can kind of see some of the folks over here on the right with the upright drafting tables, and some of the other folks over here, the design checkers on the left side. And, you know, thank goodness for things like SOLIDWORKS, right, to make drawings easier. And think about how hard it is to match up details and overlays and section views, just, you know, making one of these drawings for whether it's like a ship or an aircraft carrier. I mean, they did drawings like this to land people on the moon. So pretty impressive. So thank goodness for SOLIDWORKS. There's a bunch of tips and tricks. So Cailin, I'm going to turn it over to you first, and I'm going to let you start rocking and rolling. So
awesome. Thank you, David. My name is Cailin, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Hopefully you're all seeing SOLIDWORKS now, right?
Looks good to me.
Okay, cool. So I'm really excited to share the tips that I have for you because they're all things that when I learned about them for the first time, I was super excited about them and wish I knew about them sooner. So my first series of tips are all related to dimensioning. So we have this bracket here, and it would just be a pain to go in and have to add all my dimensions for this bracket. So I'm going to let SOLIDWORKS do the work for me through the use of model items, which is this button up here. And model items is really simple to use. You just click on it. And you can customize the settings if you want, but I'm just going to leave them as default. I'm going to make sure that it's pulling in my dimensions for my entire model. And then I'm going to go ahead and click check. And so SOLIDWORKS brings in a whole bunch of dimensions for me. And what SOLIDWORKS actually did was it picked the dimensions that I used when I was modeling this bracket. It assumes that those dimensions must be the most important dimensions if they were the dimensions that I was concerned with when I was modeling. So that saved me a whole bunch of clicks. But it does look a little bit messy, so I'm going to introduce you to my next tip, which is auto-arrange. And auto-arrange is super cool because it's going to kind of reformat everything so it looks a little bit better. And to use auto-arrange, we first select our dimensions. I'm just clicking and dragging. But pay attention to my mouse in the bottom left corner of this green box. When I release this selection box, this little icon pops up next to my mouse. And if I hover over this icon, this additional box pops up. And Jared's actually going to go into this a little bit more, but for now I want to show you this auto-arrange button. So I'm going to go ahead and click on it, and then SOLIDWORKS kind of reformats things for me. There may be like 1 or 2 things that I might want to reposition, but in general, it saves me a lot of time. Something else you might run into sometimes when you're dimensioning is if you have one view that looks kind of crowded and another view that's not so crowded, you can move dimensions from one view to another. And the way that you do this is selecting the dimension you want to move, holding down Shift, and then clicking and dragging that dimension to that new view. So now we can see that it's still dimensioning to the same features, it's just in this view instead. So that was my first series of quick tips on dimensioning. I'm going to go ahead and move on and talk a little bit about linked notes and markup. So linked notes are just like regular notes, except you can link them to various part properties. So we're going to go ahead and dive into that. To create a linked note, you start like you're creating a regular note. We go to the Annotations tab, and then we click on Note. And I'm going to go ahead and click on my gear and place my note here. And I want this note to tell me what the material of the gear is. And I know what it is. I could type in the material right here if I want to. But the reason that I'm going to link this to the material property of the gear is just in case the material of the gear changes. If I change the material of the gear, I wouldn't want to have to remember to go back into this drawing and change this note as well. So this saves me some time and some consistency as well. It would be horrible if we manufactured a ton of gears in the wrong material. So to link this note to the material property of the gear, we go over to this property manager that popped up when we first created our note, and we go down to the text format section, and then there's this button here called link to property. So I'm going to go ahead and click that. And then SOLIDWORKS knows that I'm linking to a property in my spur gear because I selected my spur gear when I was placing the note. And so all I need to do is pick which property I want to link to. I have a whole bunch of options, and you can even create your own properties. I'm going to select material and click OK, and then I'm going to accept my note. And now we can see that it says the material of my gear. If I hover over this note, in our little white text box we have here, we can see that it is indeed linked to the material of the spur gear. That's a good way of double checking that you properly linked it. If you highlight over just a regular note, then it'll just say the information that's in the note itself. So that is linked notes. I'm going to also talk about markup. Markup is kind of a new feature that was introduced within the last few years in SOLIDWORKS Drawing. To use markup, we click on this markup button, and then we can select the color that we want our markup to be in. I'm going to go ahead and select red. And then using a mouse or a touch screen, we can go ahead and draw on our drawing. I'm going to go ahead and write notes. That way my engineer knows that they need to add some notes to this drawing. And now it's super obvious that something needs to change in this drawing. If I was reviewing this drawing, but all my notes look like this text, it might get lost in the drawing itself. But it's pretty hard to miss that. So let's keep rolling. My next series of notes is about auto ballooning. So typically when you add a balloon, you go to the Annotation tab and you click balloon. And then it's a matter of clicking all the parts that you want to add balloons to. And I've always felt like this was kind of a tedious process, and I've always been a little bit afraid that I was going to miss a part. So instead of doing that, I'm going to let SOLIDWORKS put in my balloons for me through the use of auto balloon. That's this button here. I'm going to click on it. It's going to want to know which view I want to add balloons to, so I'll click on this view. And now we can see that all our balloons kind of jumped in place. And then over here, we can customize how the balloons are laid out. We can make them all a giant circle or align them to the left. We can also have a balloon for every single part instead of every single different type of part. Right now, we have a circle around a number. We can change that shape to a pentagon or one of these other options on this list. We can change it so that there's no shape at all and we just have the number. And right now, this number is referencing the line item number on this bill of materials. So we can do that thing where you see, oh, this is a 3, and therefore that must be a clean white. Or if we wanted it to say clean white right here instead, we can do that. The way that we do that is by changing the balloon text. I'm going to go ahead and click this drop down, and I'm going to select part number, which also happens to be the name of my part. And now we can see right here, without having to jump and forth, that it's clean white. We can also change that to a quantity, so how many of that type of part you have. But there really isn't a way right here in our options to have both the part name and the quantity, which is what I'm looking for in this case. So I'm going to show you how to access that. And the way that you access that, it's not listed in here at all. You have to accept your auto balloon and then reselect the balloons that you want to do this to. And then all of a sudden you have the option to add the quantity. So I'm going to hit that checkbox, and now we can see that it's telling us the quantity as well as the name of the part. So now we have all the information that is in our bill of materials. And so this is super helpful if you don't have a bill of materials or you don't want to use a bill of materials, or maybe even your bill of materials is on the front of your drawing packet and you don't want to have to flip through pages. So those are some options you have with auto ballooning. I'm going to move on to my last tip. And my last tip I saved for last because I think it's super cool and something that not a whole lot of people know about. So let's dive into this. We have this toy, and this toy has several different types of components. And each different type of component looks like there's a couple of those parts. And sometimes in a view like this, especially if it's not exploded, it's hard to see where one part ends and the next part begins. So for example, we know that this ring is part 3. We know that this section is part 2, but we're not entirely sure if this section is part of 3 or part of 2. And so an easy way of fixing that is by doing a shaded with edges view type. But sometimes you don't want that in all your views, and you also don't want to have to look back and forth between the two different views. So this last tip, I'm showing you an option that's kind of an in-between, where you get a little pop of color, but you still get the wireframe format. It's kind of a best of both worlds situation. So to access that, you go to this option gear in the top of the screen. You're going to go ahead and click that, and then go to Document Properties, and then down to Detailing. And then there's this checkbox that says Use Model Color for HLR/HLV in Drawings. And HLR stands for Hidden Lines Removed, and HLV stands for Hidden Lines Visible. And in this case, we have Hidden Lines Removed, so we know that this will work for us. We'll go ahead and click OK. And now we can see that we have that wireframe view, but we still have that splash of color. So those have been my tips. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen and pass it off to David now.
That was awesome. Good job.
Thank you.
All right, let's hit share here. And I'm going to hit the Windows tab button here. And let's get over to SOLIDWORKS. Can everybody see my screen okay there?
Yes.
All right, perfect. We're going to go over a couple of tips and tricks that have kind of come up over the last year in answering questions from customers. And some of these just kind of came from people sending in questions or needing help. And one of the ones that I get quite a bit is with leaders and dimensions. And I know Cailin did a great job with it. Jared's going to talk about dimension styles here in just a second. But we've got this plate that has one hole pattern, a second hole pattern, and a third hole pattern. And to put all these dimensions on here, what can happen occasionally is this drawing starts to get messy. So let's say that this is our 0, 0 point for now. And I'm going to pick this edge. I'll pick this dimension. I want to stick this dimension over here on the left side. And then I'm going to go back from here to here. And I'm going to locate this first hole because our hole pattern is pulling off of there, right? And one thing that happens is you'll notice that our dimensions are overlapping each other. And one of the questions we always get is there a way to break these dimensions so that there's a gap between them? And it is. And if you'll just hold down the control key, pick the two dimensions that you want to break. Over here on the left side in our property manager under the leaders tab, if you scroll down toward the bottom, there's break lines. And when you pick on break lines, it's going to put in a gap of 60 thou. And if I change it, you'll notice that this gap right here on the screen is going to change instantaneously. So let's make this up to 1/8 of an inch. I'm going to hit enter, and you'll notice that this gap here will change. There's a little more space. And if I hit the green check, we're all set. Now, if I take this dimension 3 and I put it here, here, or even bring it outside, it breaks it across any dimension now that it's in contact with. So that's a really cool feature. The same with the other one here. And if I break it over again, you'll notice that it broke the dimension. It broke the lines over. So if you run into that problem and you want to break the dimensions, you absolutely can. A really cool situation arose with a customer recently, and they wanted to do something with datum reference and their datum feature and the geometric tolerance. And they wanted to group them together. And they were like, hey, can we do this? I can't seem to get them to group. And you can. And it's a little tricky. And I'm going to show you the error, and then I'll show you the fix. So click on datum feature, And when I pick on datum feature here, we'll just drag this guy out, and then that one is B. And I pick on this bottom edge of the plate, and this is a datum C. So I've got my two datums in. But if I double click it and I want to add some geometric tolerance to it, I don't have a way to do that. And I want to link the two together. So I want to put some tolerance between the two. So if I just pick on geometric tolerance, here's where the error usually occurs. We pick on geometric tolerance and we enter our symbol. We say, okay, it's parallel. And notice in our little preview box, it's telling us what it's going to add. So, and then our primary reference, we'll hit C for this datum C down here. And we'll put in, I don't know, 10 thou, right? And if I wanted to add a third or a fourth line to this, as I added these features, you would just simply hit this down arrow button. In this case, we're just going to do this here. And when I hit the OK button, notice that my geometric tolerance is way down here. So I got to kind of drag them up and put them over the top. And now if I move B, the geometric tolerance didn't move with it, right? And the whole point is to group these together. So if I hold down Control and I grab this one, and I right click on them, I want to be able to group these guys together. And if I group them, now I can group and I put them all together. So that's kind of a cool little way to group them together for you. So hope that was a neat little trick if you ever have to do that. Another situation that came up with a customer was they wanted to write custom bill of materials. And I know for everybody that's gone through the Essentials class, you're probably seen this model 100 times over. But what they wanted to do was they wanted to create a custom bill of material that had things like spares and cost, and then wanted to add a total cost column to the whole bill of material. So we said, okay, we can do that. And often when we're answering questions like this, people are kind of a little afraid to mess with these bill of materials, but just think of it as an Excel file. And if you're comfortable with Excel, this will work out just fine. So the first thing I wanted to do was I knew that I wanted to add spares, cost, and total cost. So I'm going to write custom properties. If I open up the bracket here, and I go to my properties manager here at the top, notice I've added a property for cost. I've left total cost blank. There's no value here because I'm going to write an equation that's going to multiply the cost times the quantity. And then we have a custom property for spares. I've left this blank. Now, if I was putting a spare with it, I would put 1 or 2 here. Okay, so I'm going to close this down. Let's get back.
Hey, David.
Yep.
You mind maximizing your screen? Someone's asking to maximize your SolidWorks screen there.
Is that a little bit better?
Yeah, I think they'll like that better.
Cool. Sorry
Thanks.
about that.
No worries.
So what we want to do here is I'm going to pick just like normal, and I'm going to come over here and I'm going to hit table. I'm going to hit bill of materials. Thanks for that, Jared. I appreciate that. And I'm going to click on bill of materials. And when I do, again, I have BOM standard over here on the left. I'm going to do a part level. And I'm going to make sure that on this configuration, I have display configurations of the parts as separate items. In other words, we got a long pin and a short pin. I want them to appear as separate line items. The other thing I want to do is I like to check all uppercase. And I'm going to hit my green check. And there's our standard bill of material, right? And when we bring it in, if we move our mouse around this guy and pick on him, we'll notice that we can left align, center align, and if we pick the plus, it highlights the whole document, right? And now I can left justify or center justify, and I can move my text around. If I pick on this one, whoops, the A, I can totally change the document font. So maybe your company has a font Arial Black or Century Gothic or whatever it may be. This is where you would change it. Now what I want to do is I want to bring in the spares, the cost, and then the total cost. So I'm going to right click on column D, insert column right. Again, this is the same as Excel, right? So we're just going to hit the custom property spares that we pulled in at our custom property at our part level. We're going to write in, right click again, insert column right, and we're going to enter the cost. So we've done the the costing module, or we've worked with the machine shop. We know how much each part costs. And now we want to put in the total cost. So we're going to insert another column to the right, and this one's called total cost. And this is going to come in as blank. And now what we have to do is we have to write an equation that says quantity plus spares times the cost. In the case of, say, this one, there's 3 of them, times 18 cents a piece. So we should have a value of around 54 cents. To write that equation, pick on column G, and you'll notice that the equation symbol right here is now dark black. Originally, that was grayed out. So pick on it, and there's already an equation populated here. Just hit the delete key, take it out. And what we want to do is we kind of got to remember order of operations from calculus, right? We got to put a parentheses in, and we're going to do our columns. And we're going to say quantity, hit the plus symbol, hit the pull down for columns again, plus spares, hit a parentheses. Now, I'm going to go ahead and show you an error here. I'm not going to put a multiplication symbol in. I'm just going to hit the column, and I'm going to hit cost. And I'm going to hit the parentheses. Now, if you remember when we did calculus, 2 things in parentheses, they multiplied by each other. So if I just hit the green check here, notice that this column is all text. It's the equation that we just wrote. So let's go back and pick on that column. Pick it here, and then this time let's put a multiplication symbol between the 2. And now we look at our bill of material, and you can see that it added these 3 together, multiplied by that, so we have 54 cents. And the last thing we want to do is total this guy up, right? So I'm going to hit this line here. I'm going to insert, and I'm going to do row below. I'm going to pick on this number 10 here. We don't need it. So let's do this. Let's grab these cells here. And this button that was grayed out before is now back available to us. I'm just going to hit merged cells. So now I've merged these cells into one. And when I pick on this cell, again, I'm going to write an equation here that's going to total everything up. So I'm going to use the functions button. I'm going to hit functions, and I'm going to hit sum. And just like you do when you were adding totals in Excel, just highlight the cells that you want, hit the green check, and there's your total for $180.98 for this assembly. So again, just think of these as Excel files, right? If you've got the properties at the part level, you can totally manipulate them here at the drawing level. And if I want to save this file as a custom template to use over and over again, just hit File, Save As. You can either save it somewhere on your computer, or you can save it on your network. In this case, you can see that these are all the bombs that come preloaded with SOLIDWORKS. And in this one, we just called it total cost. And just name it and save it and let everybody know where it's at. And the next time you have to insert that bill of material, this will come in with the equations and the formatting already set in place. So with that, that's all my kind of tips and tricks. I'm going to turn this over to Jared. Jared, I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to let you have at it.
All right. Thanks, David. Some really cool tips there. Go ahead and share my second screen. Let's see. Make sure I click the right one here. Give me just a second. There we go. All right, so the tips that I've got are going to be largely focused on efficiency and performance, reducing the time it takes for you to make your edits and do the changes that you need on your drawings. And then there are some performance things that I want to address as well. So the first thing that I want to bring out is a feature that I really like, which is the R key, which brings up your recent documents here. And here I have pinned the documents that I'm going to be showing. So again, it's one of my favorite features there. So I'm just going to open up this hanger drawing here, one that's already fully dimensioned. And sometimes when you're dimensioning, you want to add certain annotations to your dimensions or to your drawing. And even more importantly, maybe you want to reuse those. So we're just going to examine this 5 diameter dimension here. And very similar to what Cailin was pointing out, you'll notice to the right, there's the little pop-up right there. And what we're going to do is add in some text here to the right of this dimension. Just put in TYP for typical, so that if there's ever any doubt about these multiple holes that are on the rest of the drawing, can just refer to this one and say, well, that's the typical size of it. So the functionality doesn't stop there, though. We can type it there, and then maybe we want to reuse that. Maybe we need to apply that TYP annotation to something else as well. So maybe we come up here to, say this 20 dimension here. We're just going to go back to the view palette here. And over here in the top right-hand corner, there's the styles button there. And you notice when you click that drop down that it has these recents here. So within your session of SOLIDWORKS on one particular drawing, the annotations that you add are listed here for quick access. So you can just come over here, click that, and it applies that same style to it. So of course, there are several other type things you can add in there, for instance, like your tolerancing or the unit precision, if you want to adjust that in that way. And then once you have it, if it's a series of things that you want to be able to save out, you can actually come over here to the property manager and either add or update a style or go ahead and save that out for reuse. So those are some tips with using styles there. Next thing I'm going to look at is updating references. So sometimes if you're in a mass manufacturing mode, you may have slightly different configurations of a single part. So the geometry is largely similar, say for one or two little features. And maybe you want to save another drawing that basically has the same dimensioning scheme, but you don't want to do that work all over again. So there's a couple of ways you can address that. One is by going to the Drawing tab up here and selecting Replace Model here on the far side there. And you can choose which views that you want to go ahead and replace there with that different model. So we're just going to toggle on all views here. Go ahead and hit Browse, and the one that's pretty similar is this Hanger 2 part. So I'm just going to go ahead and click that, click Open, and then we'll go ahead and click the green check. So you'll see that the model updates. Instead of those 3 holes on the side there, now it's this big slot, and the geometry updates in all the views. But you'll notice there's a little bit of an issue with the dimensions there. So these are kind of dangling dimensions. So these would have to be tidied up, maybe just delete them and then re-import the views. So this method works all right, and it works even better when maybe you don't have as many dimensions. But we're going to look at an alternate way of doing it. So we'll just close out this one so that those changes are not saved. And we'll go ahead and click Open here. So we were on the Hanger 1 drawing. And in the Open dialog box, before we click Open, we're going to go to this References option here. So this tells you what assemblies or what parts that the drawing is pointing to. In this case, it points us to the Hanger 1 part. And what we want to do is update that reference so that now it points to another one. And of course, as soon as we open it, we would want to do a save as operation so that we don't overwrite that original one. So once you go ahead and update the name there, you go ahead and click outside of it so that it updates to this green text here. And click OK there. Go ahead and click Open. Now you see that we get the dangling detail items here, which kind of addresses the problem that we had in the previous scenario. So we go ahead and toggle that one model dimension that's dangling, go ahead and delete it. And we see that now this is kind of a cleaner way of updating that. Our dimensions look to be still intact. The only thing that we really have to address now is maybe taking off some of these center marks here. So we could very easily go in there and just delete the ones that are not appropriate and replace those. So from there, I want to direct your attention now to some things that we can do with the title block. So first, I'm going to go ahead and edit the sheet format and go here to where it says Engineer here. Now, Cailin already brought out how you can link a note to a property, and that's the same thing that's going on here. So I want to show it here just so that to make the point that you can use that functionality within the title block. It's not restricted to just on the drawing sheet. So if you want to update that title block like so, you could actually come to a file property in this case and update that. So you put in your initials of the person that it's drawn by. Go ahead and evaluate it there on your custom properties. And since this note is tied to that, as soon as I click OK, then it's going to update right there. Now, in addition to being able to update them through file properties here and have them propagate there. There's kind of a more direct way of adding them there, and that's by using the hotspot functionality. So if you click on most of these texts here, the way I've got it set up, if I double click here, you'll see it, there's these blue boxes here surrounding some of the text. And what I could actually do is go ahead and edit these straight away. And the way that that is set up is you go to edit the sheet format. This time I'm going to use the sheet format tab. Click on edit sheet format. And then right next to that is the title block fields. So you click on that and you'll notice that there are two things there. One is that there's this rectangular box here that essentially specifies the field with which you could go ahead and set up these regions there, these hotspots there. And all of the ones that are in blue, they're in this text fields right here. Each of these is a separate note by itself. So for instance, if we just zoom in on this region here, where we say that the dimensions are in millimeters, these are actually two separate text boxes. So this one is an additional one as well. And these just work like toggles. So if you select one, find out that you don't want it, you just select it again to deselect it. So now this is set up, for instance, millimeters here, where I could quite easily change that through double click and change it to inches or whatever. So if I wanted to go through here and let's say update the description or something. So maybe I want to rename that demo drawing. And then I just update out of there. I meant to do that while I was exit out of the sheet format. But at any rate, this description is also tied to a property that was created in the model. So if I go and I open the part, we go over here, we go to our properties here, and our description there. I think I didn't update it. I think I didn't go ahead and refresh it maybe. But when that's linked to it, then that's going to go ahead and update on the part as well. So I'll go ahead and close out this one and show the last part that I have. So just go and open, or not the last one, but the next one here. So this is an assembly, and it's got quite a few components, but the thing that I want to draw attention to is not the number of components, but rather the number of views that we have. So you'll see in the view palette over here, we've got several different views that we've got. And the reason that's significant is because when SOLIDWORKS loads a drawing, it takes time to not only load the graphical and model data within the actual sheet, but it takes time to load these as well. And that can have an impact on your performance. So what you may do sometimes if you have a lot of views that you're referencing, when you go to save this model, you may just hit the red X up here to clear all. And then if you go ahead and save it like this, then when you open it, those views won't be there, and then your drawing may open a little bit faster. And of course, if you want to bring them back, you simply browse to the model. And on that note, you don't have to browse just to that one model that's referencing. You can actually click the three little dots right here, and you may choose to browse to one of the other components that references that drawing or whatever other part or assembly file that you may want. And then that's going to populate over here, and you could just bring it in there like you normally would onto your drawing sheet. So once we have that set, there's one other thing that I like to show with this model, one feature that I think goes largely unnoticed that maybe people don't know about, and that's with rotating your views. So of course, you can select from your front view, your isometric view, all of those different views. But another option you have is to use the 3D drawing view. So once you enable that guy, you can choose one view at a time, and you can actually rotate it as if you were still in the part or the assembly mode. This is good not just for maybe rotating and getting a slightly different view, but if you want to interrogate the model and just see the different components of it, just live without going back to the assembly level. So it's a pretty nice feature for visibility that we have there. And last part that I want to show you guys, or last model, is going to be talking about the new detailing mode that we have that was introduced with 2020. It's going to feel somewhat similar to like a lightweight mode or a quick view, but you'll find that you have much more functionality available to you as opposed to just being able to view it. You can actually manipulate it. So if we select detailing mode from here, you can also do that from the open dialog box. We'll go ahead and click open. And then the first time that you open this, you're going to see this little box right here, just giving you an idea of what detailing mode is capable of and things you can do there. And of course, you can choose to not show that each time that you open it. But you'll go ahead and click OK. And notice how quickly this model opens. It's almost instantaneous. And the reason for that is because SOLIDWORKS is not loading the model data. So if we go over here to actually the sheets here and just scroll down there, you'll see that here's the top level assembly, but none of those components are listed because, again, the model data is not loaded. The reason that SOLIDWORKS is able to do that is because when you open the assembly for the first time, you'll go ahead and save it in SOLIDWORKS 2020, and then SOLIDWORKS essentially remembers that. And so from there on out, you have the option to open in detailing mode. So in that mode, you can make several different edits as opposed to just viewing it. So we can actually come here. Maybe we want to add a sheet. So we just add another sheet there. We can go through our different sheets here. And of course, you see that it updates really quickly. We don't have to wait 5 or 6 minutes just to go to another sheet. Let's say that we want to cut this guy and maybe reposition a view, maybe move this over so that it's off of the model. Come back over here to our other sheet and go ahead and place that. And one other thing to note about the model data not even being loaded, this assembly that I have, the actual solid model, I actually don't have that file set on my computer. It is just the drawing here. So this can actually also be an advantage if you want to send a drawing to someone without sending the entire assembly to them. So it can be a really quick way to communicate in addition to being able to make those quick edits. So that's all I've got. I'm going to go ahead and hand it over.
Before you do that, though, Jared, we got some.
Yeah.
There's a question. What is the proper way to select a custom text position selection as default, such as have a raised or diameter dimension be horizontal? I don't have success using a saved style.
Okay, so raise or diameter dimension to be horizontal. So with positioning, I'm not 100% sure that that can be reflected in a style. That is a good question. So
I always use the rapid dimension widget to place it in a specific quadrant.
Yeah, that definitely works.
But that's as you're adding it.
Yeah.
Definitely with insert model items like Cailin showed us, it's going to try and put it someplace that may not be the right spot.
Yeah. I think I probably have to play around with that a little bit just to make sure there. Of course, if you guys have any thoughts on it, feel free to chime in. But yeah, just to make it horizontal, because you can come over here to, I want to say it's the leaders tab. I think that's where you would go ahead and change that.
Custom text position right there.
Let's see.
This is kind of aligning it.
So yeah, if you want to change it like this, let's see, I don't know if that's exactly the way that he's talking about there.
Well, maybe if they've got some more clarification, they can stick it back into the Q&A section, and we can see what we can come up with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Danny's got a question. What do you save the drawing as if you were sending it to someone? Is it normal SOLIDWORKS save without models loaded?
Let's see.
Danny, I might just save it as a PDF if you wanted to really be the lightest weight version to send somebody. There are options you could send them the native SOLIDWORKS drawing. They could only open it in detailing mode if they didn't have the models present. Might be an option.
And actually, I just mentioned that I've got a couple other questions there. I think I can answer those pretty quickly about replacing the model. So the two methods that I showed, one was going to the drawing tab up here, and then choosing replace model, and then you choose which views, and then you just browse to the one that you want. And then the other method that I showed, and you do have to close, if you're trying to do the one that you have, you have to actually close that drawing first. Then you go select the model within the open dialog here, and then choose references. And then that's where you change where it's pointing to. So the question was, will it affect the original reference? And the answer is yes, which is why you have to make sure that you save the right thing. So for instance, you might want to, before opening this, save that as hanger 1, and then immediately after you, update this, say, go ahead and you say hanger 2, click OK, and you open. As soon as it is pointing to this new reference here, that's when you go in and do a save as operation here. So you save as, and then that makes sure that your references are in order.
Yeah, what I always tell people is just go ahead and do a Control-C, Control-V of the drawing itself, because drawings are one of the things that we can copy without it really messing up any of the references. So then you've got, say, a hanger 1 and a hanger 9 drawing, but they're exactly the same. So you do a copy of them. So then if you click on to open the hanger 9, but before you actually open it, you hit the references button and then point it at the other guy. You can change the references. And then once you get it all opened, then you save it and it'll,
update
the changes. And then Danny's asking about the detailing mode. Detailing mode, it's still an SLD DRW. There's not a different file type you need to save it as. So, a lot of times when people send you an assembly, they don't send you the part files. You can send somebody just the drawing file and open it in detailing mode. Right, guys? You don't have to have all the parts. They just have to be saved in 2020 format.
Yeah.
Get that to work.
That's it. And I forget, I don't have the detailed listing in my mind, but it's very similar to the detached drawing that you could have. I think there's just some more functionality there if you open it detailing mode there.
Yeah. Okay, you can switch over to me if you want. Yeah.
Okay. So go ahead and stop sharing there, and you should be good to go there, Tony.
I gotta share my screen. So can you guys see the sheet metal part on my screen?
Yep.
So there was a question earlier about sheet metal flat pattern kind of bounding box. We've got the ability, if we right click on the cut list item, to create a bounding box. If I delete it, it'll let me create it again, create bounding box. And that gives me some additional properties in the part for the bounding box area. You can do that at the flat pattern level as well. So that's got some information in there about the number of cuts and the perimeter and stuff like that. So I've seen people use that as an option to get that flat pattern size. So I wanted to start off here with a sheet metal part and look at the configurations here. By default, we just have a default configuration. And I've seen people get messed up on this quite a bit before. When I go to make a drawing from this sheet metal part, that's when some magic happens. And if we come over here to the view palette, we can bring in a front view. We've also got a flat pattern that we can drag into the part. Now, as soon as the drawing got created and the flat pattern option showed up in the view palette, that's when, you know, the magic all happened. If we go back to the sheet metal part, now we've got a derived configuration that's automatically created just as we made the drawing. You know, long time ago, we would have to kind of make these flat pattern configurations manually. But I still see people getting in trouble. You know, if we double click on the flat pattern, we'll need to, you know, double click to activate it. But I've seen people go ahead and hit the flatten button here in the formed up version, as well as the flat pattern. And then both, so right now, both versions are showing flat, or both will show formed, and we can get things out of sync. So if you're wanting to see a flat pattern, you know, go to the flat pattern derived configuration. If we hit the flatten button, be sure to you know, toggle that back to the formed version to keep that showing. Okay. Another thing that I wanted to show back here at the drawing level is the idea of a virtual sharp. And there's only a few things now in SOLIDWORKS that require things to be pre-selected. So I'm going to select on that edge and select on that edge. And then from the sketch toolbar, I'm going to come over and hit the sketch point. And that's the shortcut, if you will, to add a virtual sharp. There's a couple different ways we can display the virtual sharp here. We've got lines crossing, just a single point. But we've got the ability now, if we want to come in and dimension using that point and giving us a dimension all the way down here to the virtual sharp on our drawing. Okay, we can do that same thing with the point at the sketch level if we want a virtual sharp there as well. Okay. So just like Jared, I like to use the R key to keep things remembered across here for the presentation. So I've got another drawing. It's another sheet metal part, but what I've gone through and done is create a number of different configurations of this part. And in each of the different configurations, I'm unsuppressing a single bend, and then I'm adding different drawing views, going through the different step 1, step 2, step 3, you know, process of bending each leg up one at a time. So in the order that I've added these drawing views, I'm going through step 1, step 2. Now the fun thing is, if I go ahead and publish this as an e-drawing, we get some fun things that we can do. Typically, when we hit the animate button from a part or assembly e-drawing, it'll animate between the front, top, right isometric views. If we hit the animate button here on a drawing like this, it's going to do something different. It's going to animate in the order that the views were inserted into the drawing. So flat pattern, bend up one leg, bend up two legs, you know, bend up the third set of legs, and so on and so forth. So I've seen people use this to, it's representing the process of you know, flattening or forming up that sheet metal part. But I've seen people also use it for assembly type ideas. Maybe they have display states or configurations and they show different drawing views of the assembly being assembled, if you will. And then once you go in and create an e-drawing, you can animate through those, and it can, you know, it's another way of creating kind of an animation of our drawing. Okay. The next one is kind of an interesting thing. It's been around for a while, and I'm going to show you a slight new enhancement to it in a minute. But here we've got an assembly. This assembly will move. So maybe we want to represent this drawing view in multiple positions of this assembly. So we can come up and use the alternate position view. And I'm going to show you a couple different ways. If we have an existing configuration that's already created, here I've got one in an open position, we can use that, right away. And let's do a rebuild to update the graphics a little bit. Well, we can show the original location and then in Phantom show it pulled up at a bit of an angle. The fun thing is I can come in and create another alternate position view on that same one. This time I'm going to make a new configuration. If we hit the checkbox now, it's going to flip us over to the assembly level and actually put us in the move tool. So I can come over and grab this and I'll try to get it somewhere in the middle between those two positions. And once I hit OK to that, flip back over to the drawing, and then we can see there the third position starting fully open and then somewhere in between for our drawing there. Okay. Another option, and this is kind of new, is this idea of an alternate position view, but for a part. So typically our parts don't move, but for this one, maybe we represent a machined version of a casting. So the casting is going to have a little bit extra material that we come back in and machine off to give us a nice, flat surface. And come in and select on this part view, do an alternate position view. And this one has an existing configuration. And we don't have the option to move things because this isn't an assembly. So we need to have that configuration, previously created. But then we can come in, we can see in Phantom the extra material that would be machined off to get us to that final machined version. So that's kind of an interesting way of looking at it. I've got another example here. This is a spring, and I've got two different configurations, a normal relaxed position and then a stretched version. So I can come over and do an alternate position view of this view with a stretched. And we can show the spring in multiple positions. I like using that 3D rotate as well. Like Jared was showing, we can rotate it up. We can actually even leave it in that rotated position. Okay. So just a couple things with alternate position views. Let's go over to this next assembly. So I've been working with the routing tools on the electrical side here recently, and we've got some options that we can do with electrical drawings as well. So I've got a stereo system, say in your car. We've got the harness that we can open up in its own little window, showing just the different connectors here. We've actually got options here to flatten the route. And there's two different methods. There's an annotation method and a more manufacturing method. I'll say the annotation method is not to scale, but it'll show us, the clips and the connectors and everything. So we can come in and look at how this looks. It's going to give us kind of a flat pattern of this. And I've already gone in and made a drawing of this. There's a create drawing option. You just open up the drawing that I've already got done. And just with a little bit of moving around, moving the bill of materials around, we've got the different information on the clips and the length of the wires and everything that we would need to make this harness. Okay. The difference between this and the manufacturing version, if we switch over to a little bit different assembly, close out of all this stuff. A little bit different enclosure, another wiring harness and some fans here. Again, we're going to open up this harness in its own little window. There's our connectors there. If I do the flatten route again, this time using the manufacturing option, and kind of give it a piece of spline to go with to kind of help it direct things. and it'll come in and give me a 2-scale flat pattern. Now I can come in and re-edit the flattened route here, and I can pick on some of these lines here to adjust the angle. You can use this wheel. So if you see the little teal color of wire there, that's where it's going to end up. So we kind of watch that. You can kind of rotate around. You got to hit the apply button to accept those changes. Okay. So we can fan this out however we want to. And I can right click and I'll open the drawing that I've already kind of created for this one. And it's going to show us, you know, information about the wiring harness. We've got options to include the, you know, pin information on the connectors and showing which color wires are going from which pin and everything. And this is going to actually be 2-scale. So I've seen people actually print this out full size on large roll drawings, you know, put it on a piece of plywood and actually use that to make the harness right off of the drawing. So I kind of picked that as another kind of drawing tool, kind of a niche little tool that's out there. So I'm trying to look back here at some of the questions. There was one that I saw. What's the best way to coat pipe like an 8-inch into a 10-inch pipe for welding? So there's if you're actually using the routing tools, Floyd, there's actually a penetrate option that will actually do the fish mouth on both pieces. There's options I've seen more of a multi-body kind of idea if you're not using routing, where you can go in and if you extruded them as solid pieces, use the surface to split the 2 pieces into bodies and then shell them out, but then do some subtracting. So I think that the penetrate option would probably be the best way if you actually have routing.
Cool. Tony, I know we're getting up against the hour, and I know everybody, we're going to hang out and answer some more questions, but I know some of you have schedules. So Tony, I'm going to jump over and share a few things here, and then we'll get back into doing some Q&A if that's okay.
Yep.
All right, share screen. All right, Windows. All righty, and so in wrapping up a few things here, and again, we're going to hang out, try and answer all your questions, and if we don't get to all of them today, email us. Next screen is going to have some email content, but our next webinar coming up is SolidWorks CAM Start to Finish, the fastest and most effective tool pass. The presenter is Wesley McMurtry. He's out of our Tulsa office. Just an all-around great person. You're going to learn a lot. It'd be a good presentation to sit in on, and that's on July 15th at noon Pacific Standard Time. Again, that's the one you want to bookmark on your calendars, or look for the GoEngineer email with the link to it. And finally, thanks for attending. If you will, submit your feedback or your questions to D. Cersley, C-E-R-S-L-E-Y, at goengineer.com. We're going to review all the questions, the team and our tech support team, and then they will issue out 3 Amazon gift cards to 3 questions at random. So for those of you that submit your questions, we would definitely want to hear back from you, whether it's your favorite drawing tip or tool, or is there a setting that you found particularly useful? We want to hear back from you, or maybe you have a tip of your own. We'd love to hear back from you. So on behalf of Tony and Cailin, Jared, myself, and GoEngineer, we appreciate you guys sitting in today, and we're going to hang out here just a little bit and do a little walk through these question and answer. So if you want to send a few more questions, I think it's 2 o'clock now. Yeah, well, 1 minute till, so we'll call it 2. Tony, Jared, Cailin, can you guys all hang out till about 2:10?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's hang out for a few more questions here. And then let me drag this over here. Let's see what's actually sitting open. Let's see. let's see what the questions are still open here. What about the dimensions are in light gray? I think that was on Jared when you had switched yours over, when you had done the replace model.
Mm-hmm.
I think those are just reference dimensions.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why they were in parentheses. If I remember seeing that correct. Sorry, I missed this question earlier, but.
Yeah. And then there's a setting, and I don't know is it worth it to show it?
Absolutely. I'll stop sharing and go ahead and show it if you got it up.
Okay. I have, that model up. So I'll come over here. So, right now there are references, and I actually don't remember exactly where it's at. So I'm going to use the handy dandy search, and maybe that'll point me to it. So reference dimensions here, and it may take me a minute to find it here. Let's see. Okay, so it's not going to be there.
Yeah, I think it's an automatic default.
Maybe it's a parentheses. That guy. Okay, so that's not toggled on.
Yeah.
Don't remember where that setting's at.
Okay, we can always follow up.
Yeah.
But I know it's somewhere in there. I do remember that.
Mm-hmm. Is for sure a setting.
Yeah, and then
I'll go ahead and stop share. And
there's a question in there from Glenn about when adding balloons, I sometimes need to use user defined, and I want my quantity to be blank.
Yeah, I was looking into that one too.
You should be able to set a style on the balloons as well, and then just change to a different style.
If he's wanting quantity to be blank, sounds like just like a blank, bottom section of the balloon. Maybe set that to a custom property that doesn't have anything in it.
Yeah, you have to set it to override the value, because there's not really a blank option. You could have it have reference in parentheses. Maybe. Glenn, if you want to send some more details on what you want for that, maybe an example, we can try to come up with a better answer for you. There's also go ahead.
It's like that last one that just came in. Says, can we have a go back to the drawing search for hanging missing duplicates? I believe it was Jared missed how that menu opens up.
Okay, yeah. All right. We'll go back over here. And if I go to, so it's this one, if we close it, short answer is it opens automatically, but I don't remember where that was at. Let's see if I go here, and I think, okay, I'll go show in folder. There we go. So show in folder, and we've got this guy. I'll open it. Yeah, I should have done the references there. So bear with me here.
Okay.
Let's see, does it show in folder here? Training files, so I was trying to gotta remember where I put it at. So see, storage training files, drawings, and hang on. Lesson 12. All right. Okay. So if we go, oh, that was already open. We go to references here, and if we change that to maybe the other one, because there's a third one there. And I hadn't tried it with this one, so that box may or may not come up. If it does, it usually just comes up here. This one's a different file, so once more. References. To cancel. Okay. Open. And then it just pops up. Unless of course you do the do not show again. So that's how that comes up.
I was going to respond to the one about I'd like to rewrite my variables such as quantity and description in a part and have custom properties that are always filled in automatically, asking about a webinar. What I said, I usually just point people to go ahead and add the custom properties to the part and assembly templates. So that way when you go file new, the description is already there or the weight is already there. You already have the weight could be pointing at the mass properties. Description could be blank, or sometimes I have it XXXXXX just to draw attention to it once it shows up in the bill of material. So that might be a good way to do it. So is there a way to have the font auto resize to fit in the title block? So there's one option to do a, was it fit text?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a specific, the text box doesn't get bigger. It would, if you've got, a fixed amount in your title block cell, you can have it kind of, scale to fit kind of, there's kind of a limit to how much you can still stick in that one little box. That's how I would do it.
And then to follow up, Jeff Linderman out of our Houston office has sent over a thing on the dimensions that were coming in hidden, and it's under settings. Of course, it's always hidden where you don't think it should be. I don't know. Am I sharing my screen right now?
Let's see. It might still be on mine. Sorry about that.
All right. Sorry about that. Let me share screen. And hold on one second. He said it's under settings and then under colors. All right, there it is, popped up over on the screen, colors, and then dimensions non-imported. So that's where you would set that color. It's coming in defaulted gray. If you wanted to change it, that driven or that reference dimension, if you wanted to change it to red or orange, just pick on it and hit edit and just pick your color from out of the color chart. So I hope that answers that question. Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate that. Let's see, what other ones have we got open? Don't check the.
Floyd, if you're there, I got your email. I'll look into that and send you back an answer.
Cool. And then there's one from Hope. Will getting the dangling items be different if you were working within PDM?
It shouldn't matter.
Shouldn't matter, yeah. So, Hope, we appreciate your question. And everybody, we appreciate their questions. And cool. Good job, everybody.
Yeah, Mark's got to go and just don't check the don't show again. Those messages that you've dismissed will go over into a system option setting where you can bring those back every time and bring them back to life. If you hit, don't ask me again, because it'll stop asking you when you start to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I think, so going back to one of the questions that was asked about the reference dimensions, I think it was that setting add parentheses by default that it applies to when they get added, but it's not necessarily retroactive like ones that are already on the sheet. So I think that's how that workflow would go.
Theme for a black viewport.
So we've got options for the different colored themes. So Avinash is asking about the black. That's kind of an AutoCAD kind of thing. Problem with that, you could do it at the drawing level, maybe easier, but remember at the sketch level, we've got problems with, blue lines, red lines, and black lines, yellow lines. Black lines don't show up on a black background. So I've seen people, if they do want a black background, have to change a lot of the black colors over to white or some other different color and swap them around a little bit. But there are some new themes when you look at the colors. There's a kind of default light gray, medium, and then a dark gray. And then I've seen people have the drawing or the viewport background kind of match that same color. But then you got to be careful about the other colors of the other things that you want to change. So looks like one more from Brooke. And did somebody already answer that one? In drawing mode, how can you set a customized drawing sheet to default? So every time you open a drawing, it opens a previously filled in sheet. So it doesn't have to be formatted every time. The thing about drawings is they're actually two different levels. You've got the document properties for arrow size and things like that, but then kind of behind that you've got the sheet format. So there's two different file types. The sheet format's going to have the title block and the customized text in there. So an SLD DRT, you can have a drawing template that represents a specific sheet format, and then once you have that sheet format created, you don't have to bring it in and reset it up every time. It would be there. I'm trying to think if there's I've got to think there's a video out there. So Brooke, we may need to send you a link for a video to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll write that one down. Any other questions you guys can?
I think that's about it. Good job. Let's see. Well,
Participants, are we still showing?
Oh, there's no open questions. All right. Well, again, on behalf of Tony and Cailin and Jared, myself, everyone at GoEngineer, we hope everybody has a safe and healthy day. Take care of yourselves, and we'll see you at the next webinar. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, guys.
Have a good one, guys.
Me too.